So hi everyone and welcome to a very special interview here with Mina Conkbayir, where we're going to be talking a little bit about a really important issue in this situation. Mina, do you just want to say hi to everyone?
Hi everyone. Matt got my surname wrong again, but never
Ah,
mind.
there we go. I'm trying and I even got it. I even got her to explain it to me this time and I still can't get
Excellent.
it right. So for those of you who didn't get to join us last Thursday, we had a session with Minna, but sadly, due to a few technical difficulties, we lost her for the last 15 to 20 minutes. And there was some really important stuff that we wanted to talk about how this situation has affected children and how we as early years, as workers in the early years, can make sure that we're ready to start afresh with a new perspective of trauma-informed practice. And I thought it was just really important that we got the time to sit down and talk that through properly. So thank you so much for joining us, Minna.
Pleasure.
So to start off with, I think one thing that we covered a little bit in the session, but I did just want to kind of start off with again is basically, where do you see as some of the big impacts on brain development, but also just in general on children during these times of having something like this crisis, and how it could have impacted them, and how as workers in the early years we need to sort of be aware of what could be coming up when we come up to what might be sort of a more normal reopening again.
I think it's really important to remember that every child is different. The family makeup is different. Some of the children would have had fantastic, memorable experiences where they never want to go back to school again, which is where my daughter's at the moment, to be honest. But other children aren't so fortunate. You know, their parents might not be so emotionally available. They might be stressed, depressed themselves, battling with financial issues or drug use, domestic abuse, and some children will be witnessing all of this, and that takes its toll mentally, not just in the short term but across the life trajectory in many pervasive ways. And I think this is why I keep banging on about having to be trauma informed in our practice, in everything we do, but not just as a tick box superficial way, but actually embedding it in every policy, every procedure, in all our interactions with children and our language about children. And we'll probably touch upon this a bit later. And I know I'm fast forwarding, but I do get very angry about this. There's a new guidance document out for primary schools, and I think Annex A is all about behaviour in children with SEND. And Matt, I had to ring a few colleagues and say, like, is this real? Am I reading this correctly? And they're like, yeah, they're parents with children with SEND, and they're saying, my child can't cope. He will not cope with this, and I'll end up taking him out of school. And a couple of them that stuck in my mind, Matt, was one, children shouldn't be touching their face, their nose, their eyes. Now, some children with SEND especially do it. They do it to self-soothe. Okay, we know this. Number two, they are recommending the appropriate sanction and reward systems for children with SEND especially. I'm sat here with you saying we need to move forward in 2020 post-COVID with a trauma-informed lens for the sake of everybody. And I'm not saying that everyone's going to go back traumatized, but a lot of children will, a lot of adults will. Some would have been bereaved, staff members would have been bereaved, children would have been bereaved. How do we contain that? How do our containers, get that containment for themselves? And when you're reading documents like that from the government, the DfE, stating that this is the way forward, I am really shocked, and I find it distressing, because I've already had parents saying to me, who are also teachers, etc., I don't want to send my child back. They're going to fail. They are setting them up for failure. So going back to your question, some children right now, although we are under the umbrella of a global pandemic, are managing quite okay because their parents can contain that. They can co-reg through and self-reg, but some can't. And some children are going to go back with that, on top of having a range of special educational needs or disabilities, perhaps being bereaved. Also, the anxiety that comes with lockdown. I want to see my friends. Why can't I see my friends? My child's like that. She's getting quite low at the moment, actually, and I'm trying my best to boost her up. But there's only not so much I can do, because I believe a loving foundation in the home is the springboard from which we want all our children to go forward with. But it's very difficult for them. And I think as someone who does suffer from anxiety and OCD, it does have an effect on my child. And I know I'm not alone in that. Again, many conversations with colleagues during lockdown, and that I can't cope, you know, and I said, I understand, but we have to find that inner resilience somehow to move forward from, for the sake of our children.
And I think it's really interesting you mentioned that, because it was something that came up a lot last week, was that the government guidance, we have to take it as much as we can and really try and think where we can about things like social distancing or bubbles, if that's going to be necessary to contain this, but also being a little bit realistic sometimes. And I think that particularly within the early years, in any case, in regular early years practice, but in specifically when you do have children who have, you know, additional needs, that's going to be really important to understand perhaps like the limit of what's realistic within these age ranges and with these children.
Absolutely. You can't expect a child with especially severe SEND disability to be socially distanced. They're going to need one-to-one care and support. They won't be able, you know, you can't leave them alone. They're going to need that extra nurturing, and also having sensory breaks. Then that means they're going to need the key person to go around that setting or school with them to have that sensory break. How many times that child will need it, we do not know. Some with neurological disorders won't be able to retain the information or remember it and follow those instructions. So what then? That child's going to be reprimanded under that document, for example, or under these outmoded, archaic behavior management systems. I don't think so. And that's why I'm going to name someone now, she'll probably be embarrassed, but Ursula Christet Walton from Bertram Nursery Group, you know, she undertook my online training in self-reg and neuroscience. She's now a self-reg champion and a neuroscience champion, and she's completely, Matt, across, I think they're 48 settings, they've managed to eschew behavior management and put in self-reg policies.
Brilliant.
And for me, that is astounding what she's achieved with the babies, the parents, because we need parents on board. We need them as that golden thread, right? There's no point going, we've done wonders with this child, but they go home and it all falls down. Because like I said, we've got parents out there who are depressed, who are anxious, you know, these can become disorders if they're not supported in the right way. So, you know, completely changing, getting rid of that behavior management. So like you're saying, yes, to an extent, there's, you know, government legislation, etc., that we have to follow, bearing in mind we also have a lot of common sense, and we are trained professionals, and we actually do have children's needs at the heart of what we do. And I don't think the government, the DFE, do actually, but that's another rant for another day. But so what I'm trying to say is basically, practitioners need to be brave. They know what they need to do to best support these children, and I'm urging them to go and do it. What is the worst that can happen, honestly? If Ofsted come in and say and question your practice, but if you can justify it, the rationale is, sir, madam, it's because this is working best for this child.
Yeah.
End of. There is no argument against that. You have to, especially post-COVID. You know, at this moment, I feel, Matt, I think I mentioned it last week, we've got a blank slate now that we can, run riot with. And I would say top of that list has to be trauma-informed practice, so that we are catering for every child and actually thereby every adult's needs, instead of going, oh, we have to do this. You know, I've got visions, like I said last time, I think, of practitioners obsessing about cleaning. You know, where's the time literally to then go and bond and connect with each child? You know, oh, but we have to be distanced. Do you really? The government knows what it's doing by letting us go back on the 1st of June. Some have never gone away anyway. And with that are going to be risks and implications. And it's about how we manage that as responsible adults with, I'm going to say it, children's mental health at the core of what we do. Otherwise, we are going to re-traumatize these children who are traumatized, not everyone, on a daily basis. And something that I wanted to mention earlier that I forgot, with regard to early brain development, I also recommend everyone and anyone to look up Dr. Stuart Shanker's 5 domains of self-regulation.
Okay.
Because when we understand those, like you've got the biological domain, right? So if we take the biological domain and we're looking at stressors like illness, lack of stimulation, too much time sat down indoors. Social domain, difficulty in understanding the impact of their behavior on others. Pro-social domain, difficulty coping with others' stress. And that's a big one, especially right now. emotional domain, you know, lots of strong emotions at the moment being experienced, like anger, fear, anxiety. And in the cognitive domain, therefore, you know, difficulty in processing what is going on, and difficulty in processing information. So we, without a trauma-informed lens, or a self-reg lens, if you like,
Mm-hmm.
we'll miss all of that, right? And what we will do is look at those 5 domains individually as bad or challenging behavior. So it's not only children that are traumatized, it's especially children with SEND who are going to be triggered all over the place. You know, if they can't touch their face, if they can't self-soothe, if they can't stim, and, you know, they're being reprimanded. What on earth is that? It's ignorant, you know, it's not taking into account the science that we have at our disposal. And I am again urging everyone to just step up and be brave and go, this is what we're going to be doing from now on with our blank slate, and this is why. I mean, if a global pandemic isn't going to cause that shift in mindset, nothing will.
Fabulous. But I think that's, I think that rallying call to be brave also comes with a rallying call to be both informed but also trusting in your own knowledge. And I think that's something, again, that was wonderful to come up last week, was to say, this doesn't change what you know about early years care, about early years education. It doesn't change any of it. You've got to find a way to fit that in to these new guidelines, but not at the expense, of the things that we know are really important within that age range.
Absolutely. Our knowledge of child development is that's our bedrock, Matt. But all too often when a new initiative comes in or something, it's like we don't know anything. What do we have to do? Oh my God, I'm scared. And I don't blame practitioners, not at all. What I'm trying to say is we're always like robbed of our intellect and our expertise and our experience as parents, carers, foster carers, and professionals at the end of the day. And I think we need to now say, stop. This is how we are moving forward, and this is why. And after last week, I have to say, everyone got great feedback because everything was so useful and timely. And, you know, a lot of practitioners saying about, you know, the bit that I did manage to say, like, thank you so much, because it makes me know that I'm doing the right thing by my children. Because me, with this, you know, obsession with the neuroscience of early brain development, when I got into it 17, 20, even 10 years ago, I felt very isolated, Matt, very alone, because nobody else was having this conversation in early years especially. But I kept with it because I was like, people have to know this. We have brains, bodies, you know, they're inextricably linked, and how I'm feeling is going to manifest as my behavior. Simple. Then now in our outmoded education system, that's why so many children are being tripped up, because, you know, teachers are not trained in that ITT to understand that actually, if we are feeling vulnerable, if we are unsafe, if we are not encouraged to socialize and be social and manage, and I don't mean control our emotions, I just mean manage, to be aware of our, you know, physical sensations and how it manifests physiologically and therefore behaviorally, we are going to keep failing so many children. And this is why I believe it has to be embedded alongside, yes, our child development knowledge, all those foundation theories. But like I said, we need a new contemporary scientific lens. Moreover, now we need it to be post-COVID appropriate, and it has to be immersed in trauma-informed knowledge.
And I think one of the things that was really brilliant was you pointing towards this 5 stages or 5 understandings of self-regulation. And I wonder if we have anything else like that, because I think it's really fantastic. I think a lot of people will really agree with your rallying cries of being brave in this situation and taking it as an opportunity. And if I am a leader, I think one of the first things I have to get in place, as far as I can see, is to make sure I have the right steps to make sure I can allow my practitioners to be practitioners and trust their instincts. So once I've got that kind of health and safety understanding of the pandemic, once I've got that sorted out, how do I lead my practitioners in their understanding of what they need to be both on the lookout for and how they need to act in order to make sure that children are best supported?
I think, like I mentioned along with colleagues last week in the conference, our knowledge of that individual child is going to be our key tool, if you like. How were they pre-COVID? What were they struggling with? What are they like now? Conversations ongoing with parents, foster carers, carers, to see what they were struggling with as well, because children are going to carry that trauma. I know I've probably re-triggered my child over and over, and that's terrible to say. And my husband often says, you know, it's about time you practice what you preached more. And I'm like, I can't, you know, it's difficult if a brain that's been wired for trauma from childhood and now trying to grapple with a global pandemic, it's bloody difficult, you know. So I would say hold on to your knowledge of that child and look towards, you know, doing your own research on trauma-informed care and practices. That it varies as well, Matt. Some have 5 principles, some have 9. I've got 7 noted down that I want to share with you in a moment. But before the trauma-informed practice can happen, again, it comes back to us having at least a brief overview, like a good understanding perhaps of early brain development and what can prevent and enable not just learning to occur, but for a child not to just live in that survive mode, but for them to thrive. And I, you know, often talk about the upstairs and the downstairs brain. And I think this is very relevant for practitioners to go, oh, downstairs, upstairs brain, or the handy brain model for those that don't know, but many will because, you know, they've engaged with my training in the books, whatever. And it's just that, you know, we have a downstairs brain where our emotionally reactive brain regions are. So the amygdala, which is like the brain's panic button, and the hippocampus, which is responsible for memory recall and learning. But again, with the amygdala, it's greatly impacted by the effects of trauma. So our hippocampus volume actually shrinks if we're traumatized over and over, if we're re-triggered. The amygdala is overactivated and grows in size as a result of trauma. Then we have our upstairs brain, which is our rational brain. And that's home to a key brain region, the prefrontal cortex chiefly. And that's where all our executive functions reside. So, you know, curbing impulsive behavior, knowing what to focus on, you know, knowing what to ignore.
So to some degree that upstairs brain can be in control of the downstairs brain.
Exactly that. So, you know, we need that upstairs brain to keep talking to the downstairs brain, right? If they're connected, then that child is safe. They are, you know, those are the children that sit down, or, you know, they can do a bit of work, they can engage, they're pro-social. They're confident beings, yeah. They're not shy, they're not reticent, they trust in themselves, they trust in the adults because that safe base is there, and that adult understands them and potential triggers. But again, it's knowing that child. But when we are not aware of this simple bit of knowledge, say of the downstairs, upstairs brain, we will keep triggering our children day in, day out in that setting through the environment, physically, indoors and outdoors, and through our interactions and through our unrealistic sometimes expectations. And again, I'm going to refer back to that primary school guidance and the, you know, reward and sanction system. So when we understand, right, well, there's a downstairs emotionally reactive brain, like a panic button going on in there, then there's an upstairs thinking superhero brain, if you like, some people call it, we need to keep those talking, right? Because if we don't, that child is going to feel anxious, threatened, stressed. Remember, self-regulation exists in those 5 domains, and that we are probably pushing buttons for those children, especially post-COVID, with that obsession. And I don't mean that critically, I'm sorry, maybe I should take that back, but, you know, the hygiene and the distancing and all this pressure, that's panic inducing in itself. We will trigger that child, right? So that lid will be flipped. That child then might lash out, hurt themselves, want to hurt others, you know, they'll be aggressive, you know, they won't be able to get back to that psychological space. So we'll need to put that lid back down so that the communication can occur between the downstairs and the upstairs brain. And that rational brain is online, and that panic button, which a lot of us exist in day to day, I have to say, is switched off. Because if that panic button's going like this, panic, 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 that's because, again, some of us have faulty neuroception. That's like invisible antennae going, am I safe? Is he safe? Am I safe here? Can I trust him? But some of us, because of childhood experiences that were particularly awful and chaotic, or we do have SEND, or we didn't have such a good time during lockdown, we will be triggered all the time, and that can manifest as challenging behavior. But if we go back to, like I'm saying, you're asking me what can we do, banish behavior management policies and procedures, get knowledge about early brain development, self-regulation, the domains, and how you are co-regulators, you will see transformation in your children, your babies, and yourselves. And again, I have got resources, as people know, on that. I'm not here to big myself up, but speak to people like Ursula. She has done it and ran with it. I'm using her as a case study for a new journal I'm writing for. You know, this is wonderful stuff. And it's not magic, it's very easy. It is all about understanding early brain development and the power of connection, but also the power that you have to be change instigators. Not, I don't know, you know, literally actually yesterday, long conversation with another friend who's a primary school teacher, complaining about the head. And I said, look, I said, God knows what the organization is like. They're probably, you know, immersed in trauma right now. She's probably feeling panic stricken. We have to make allowances for this, you know, maybe have the chat with her. How are you feeling? There's massive pressure on our heads and our leadership teams, and they don't even know what's going on because, you know, sorry, Matt, but the government doesn't really know what's going on or what it's doing and the rationale behind it. And I do feel that, again, early years doesn't really appear on the radar as much as it should be right now, because our youngest ones needs the most support in terms of regulating how they feel and regulating their behavior. And we will not achieve that under a behavior management paradigm.
And I think it's as you say, it's about understanding those. It's actually fundamental. It's like saying, A, the expectations that we had before may not have been right anyway.
Yes.
And B, they're especially not right in these circumstances. And that if we really understand those expectations, lower them significantly, and try to focus on understanding rather than punishing or rewarding, then we're going to get a lot further in making sure all our children develop and are comfortable and safe.
Absolutely. Look, it's very simple. Going back to behavior management, I don't care what document's been put in my face, and I've had to read quite many actually. They're all redundant. We have children's mental health. I mean, it's been a shambles for many years. 1.25 million children and young adults experience mental health issues. No doubt that would have skyrocketed by now. Only 300,000 receiving help. You know, CAMS is at breaking point. And this behavior management ideology is a carrot and stick approach. Well, if I do this, I get that. But it's not teaching them intrinsically why it's so useful to them as children and then as teens and adults to develop that resilience emotionally. You know, that self-reg for me, I say it all over the gaff, in my talks, in my writing, it is the greatest gift we can give to children, because as I joked about earlier, but it isn't funny when I'm in the midst of an anxiety attack, which, you know, they can last for weeks or months if it's critical. If it's very bad, you know, I can't self-reg properly. I find it extremely difficult when I'm triggered, and, you know, my husband doesn't understand it sometimes, and I sent him a load of reading to do just yesterday, because I was like, this is it. I said, you won't ever understand what it's like to be in someone's shoes of anxiety. You haven't had it. And I just think, building from inside outwards, we are going to give children so much more capacity to cope and be resilient, so they're not just in survival mode, like I mentioned, that downstairs brain stuff, but they're in that rational upstairs brain. They're cool, and if they do lose their calm, they can recollect that calm. Absolutely. We have the power to do that.
That's really powerful. And I think so much of what you've said there, I think, is really going to hit home with a lot of people. And as we sort of start perhaps to round off the chat, I really wanted to go into those 7 specific strategies that you talked about, so that people perhaps feel like they can definitely be inspired by you, Monet, because I know I certainly do, but also feel like people perhaps can walk away from this and feel like they know where to start planning their own policies and strategies when they come back to reopening.
I hope so can I just recap on what people have to do? I don't want to sound draconian. Number 1, if you've got behavior management policies in place, put them in the bin, burn them, do whatever you want, but get rid. Okay. Make connections with people like myself, like Ursula, Christette Walton, Bertram, Nursery Group online, because they have done it and it is massively transformative. Then we need you to get educated on the neuroscience of early brain development. And I don't mean go and swallow a dictionary and come out with all these, you know, technical terms, but just get a rough understanding. our brains and our bodies are inextricably linked. It has an impact on how we see behavior. On which note, going back to the self-reg theory and the 5 domains, I also urge practitioners to start reframing behaviors that they observe. And going, oh God, he's doing that again. We'll go, well, what could have triggered him? I say to you, add to your list of to-dos, be curious. Look at your environments, look at your interactions, look at how you support each other as staff. Is anyone feeling undervalued, really stressed? That teacher friend I spoke to last night, she said, I'm working so hard. I've had really bad internet connectivity problems. I'm now being accused of not working enough. And she's the most passionate, dedicated one of that I know. So it's about taking care of yourself as an adult, taking care of each other, and using that trauma-informed paradigm from which to work. And again, those 7 principles are deceptively easy, but actually when I read them out, I have to read them out or I'll forget them. I'll get too excited and talk too much. But you need to go, actually, are we doing any of this? So number 1, creating a sense of safety. And I don't mean in that health and safety procedures have to be ticked off. It's, are my children safe? Because this world, you know, their setting is going to probably look very different and feel very frightening, because all those familiar standpoints and the objects and the activities and the routines would have been smashed to pieces, Matt. So are you able to create that sense of safety? Again, going back to self-reg practice, creating self-regulation spaces in your setting and outside of the setting if you have that access. So when children are feeling overwhelmed, jittery, again, this is why you need those conversations with children daily throughout the day. How are you feeling? You know, we have the neuroscientist Dan Siegel coined the phrase, name it to tame it. And we know that, Matt, you might be feeling really anxious one day, really unsure about something. You don't want to say it. You don't even want to bring it to light, because that's admitting it. And imagine that for a child who might have send communication difficulties. If you give them that space, you know, to say, how are you feeling? I'm feeling really, I don't know, my chest feels tight, or I feel sick, or I've got a headache. What you know, and then you ask, well, why might that be? And then they might say, well, they're feeling scared, or they're missing, you know, whatever it is, you know, the language where early is. Linked to this, it's regulating the nervous system. So all the strategies I mentioned earlier on, like mindfulness, doesn't cost a penny, scientifically proven to reduce cortisol activity and therefore stress reactivity. That is massive. We have it in our own power to reduce that stress hormone, cortisol. And again, because if that's awashing our brains and our bodies along with adrenaline, we are in no capacity to listen to any instructions and learn. Therefore, we'll get a thundercloud near our name, or be, you know, sent to, you know, with no golden time, whatever. So exercise, it releases a protein called BDNF, which regulates neuronal activity and improves synaptic connectivity. So all those junctions at which our neurons meet and communicate with each other. You know, it releases serotonin, our happy hormone, and God only knows we need a hell of a lot of that at the moment. You know, it could be sound therapy. I particularly like soothing jazz when I'm dysregulated, and doing deep breathing again, tapping. There are so many things, but number 1 in all of that to calm our nervous system is those connections, the relationships, because that grounds us, that makes us feel safe enough, you know, to get on about, you know, our daily lives. Predictability, we need to make sure that we have structure and routine in place, but that these are negotiated now. Remember that blank slate, so that these are negotiated with our parents and our children, especially our children with SEN, who are all too often, I'm getting really angry now, I'm so sorry, they're, you know, all too often expected to just conform and go with and fit in, you know, that square peg round hole, but I can't fit in. Well, then, you know, get sent to the head teacher, go on red. No, I don't think so. Imbeciles who created this behaviour management and behaviourist theory nonsense. You know, we've got to let go of the 50s now. It's 2020, need a different lens. So also power with strategies instead of power over strategies. And what that simply means is giving every, and I mean every child, choice in that daily routine, encouraging them to make decisions with you, engaging them. making, you know, having little planning meetings. I know that Leaf nurseries have brilliant children's planning meetings. I used to love just going in and watching them when I worked there. Beautiful. I also think that encouraging them to evaluate, you know, they are service users at the end of the day. How are you feeling? How did that go? You know, would we like more of that? Would we like less of that? Why not? Why aren't they participating in all of this? Again, focus on building social emotional skills and building that self-reg and resilience capacity. That again comes from us being co-regulators. So we might be feeling particularly wound up, stressed, upset. Speak to your leadership team, get that support from whoever you need. Okay, you have to be honest about how you're feeling mentally. No one's expected to be, I'm feeling wonderful, you know. It's like, I need help. If you get the help, then you're able to do that self-regging with those children. And finally, number 7 is fostering post-traumatic growth. And quite simply, Matt, that just means instilling a sense of hope in your practitioners, your team, your parents, and your children. Yep, things are a bit crappy right now. They're really strange. And I'm honest with, you know, my daughter, I don't like it. Well, it's plain for her to see anyway when I'm triggered. But say that it's not going to be forever. We're going to go back to, you know, our normal very soon. And you can start making plans for that and talking about the past and how that can be our future again. So that I think, you know, when we look at those 7 principles, it's just painfully clear that it is the only way forward with that lens of self-reg. To me, then we will leave no child behind, regardless of their, you know, unique background, be it a chaotic one or SEND, bereavement. You know, we can all pull it together for these children by being that safety net, because we've looked at ourselves and what we give off that is negative, but also us as agents for that positive change, and using our environments for the power of good. So again, the self-reg spaces, those conversations with children, parents and practitioners alike.
Fantastic. I think your passion for this topic is just so clear, and I don't want you to have to apologize again about
I'm going to have to go and do some self-regging myself after this.
Is before we just tie things out, was there anything else that you kind of wanted to add to kind of sum up a lot of what we've been talking about? If there was one thing you wanted people to walk away from listening today with, what would that be for you?
Not just one thing, I'm afraid. I need a few. But one thing I didn't mention is that, again, as Bertram Nursery Group are doing, I said, look, you know, Ursula, what's going on? What are you doing? Tell me, please, because this is my perspective. And we were saying no curriculum for the first few weeks, completely child-led always anyway. And just to, again, not be afraid of trying things, you know, that are new. So, like I said, my to-do list, wish list. No, it's not a wish list. It's an action list. Okay, actions. Get rid of behavior management. Get knowledgeable about self-reg and trauma-informed practice. It doesn't have to be so deep and, you know, you need to swallow lots of academic journals. No, you're a human being. We're born to be relational. You know, we're born to be connected to others socially and neurologically. Just go forward in the way that you know is best for these children post-COVID. Relational approaches have to rule the day. Get rid of behavior management and focus on doing what is right for those children.
That was wonderful. If I could clap along, I would have been doing so for most of that. I know that was
just if we can instigate a positive change, well, let's use this, you know, the chaos of COVID to improve our practice and make it really work for every child. I think now really is the time.
Fantastic. And where can people go if they'd like to hear a little bit more about what they're doing, access some of the resources that you've been talking about? Where's the best way to find out more about what you're doing, Nate?
I'm on social media, obviously, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook. I've got my website, and also still planning my conference for the 14th of November, which I didn't actually announce up until now. So, you know, there's loads out there, and I don't want people to feel, oh, but can I get in touch with her? Get in touch with me, ask me your questions. I'll send you resources. I'll send you links to websites that are useful and reliable, but please don't, I'm going to take that back. It's not like, don't just sit there and take it, but just, you know what you need to do. go and do it. You have my blessing. I'm begging you.
Wonderful. What a wonderful way to finish. And I've learned so much. I hope everyone who's also gets to listen back to this, learns so much as well. Minna, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much, Matt. Take care.